I can't see everyone, but I hope you can see me, and I hope you can see my slides. I'm here today to talk about humanizing your brand and how to leverage human-centric research for marketing, for product development, or for whatever department you might be in where you could use more human insights to guide your decision-making. I'm going to start off with a story. Apologies for the pixelated image here, but I wanted to share a story that had a lot of impact on me when I was doing research about 6 years ago. I was working for a consulting company and I was doing research for a pharmaceutical client who was looking to develop more patient-centric solutions. So they hired us and we went out and we did research around what the experience was like to live with Parkinson's disease. Now we were working with neurologists on their side, doctors, people who'd been working in the pharmaceutical industry for 20 plus years. And we went out and did a very human-centric research project, speaking to people living with Parkinson's, instructors who taught those living with Parkinson's different techniques and movement, spouses, caregivers. And so I found myself at the end of the project in a room just like this with probably 5 times more people than this, staring and waiting to hear the findings, waiting for me to give them the information so that they can create their solutions, give them the data. And I went through my research for 2 hours. And at the end of the 2 hours, the man at the end of the table, who looked somewhat like this, very serious, stern face, put up his hand and he said, I just learned more in 2 hours than I have in my entire practice. And the man was a neurologist who'd been practicing for over 20 years. And I was pretty floored when he said that. I thought, like, what could I possibly have shared that he didn't already know? And then I realized what I shared in those 2 hours were stories, were narratives about how people live their life, the interaction between someone living with Parkinson's and their spouse, and how that relationship goes from one of an intimate relationship to one of a caregiver relationship and the strain that puts on a relationship. I talked about the immense shame and sense of isolation of living with Parkinson's. And I shared the real stories of people who don't necessarily share this information with their medical professional. And so after 2 hours of taking them on this journey, it gave them so much insight into how they could provide solutions, not only for those living with Parkinson's, but for the people around them, the caregivers, the support system. And so I wanted to share that with you because it was one of the most powerful presentations I've ever been in. And it showed me how important it is to spend the time to really understand people, not just gather your statistics, not just get the numbers to tell you what to do, but to spend time with people. And so today, my goal is to share with you my thoughts on moving from a marketing mindset to a human-centric mindset. Moving away from looking at people as a set of numbers, a population, a group to push ideas onto, and more towards a human-centric approach where you really take the time to explore and understand what people need and what they want. And so I'll just start off by saying that my background is in social sciences. I studied anthropology in university and did a master's in anthropology. And it's an incredible field of study because it's essentially, if you break down the word, the study of humans. So it studies anything and everything. A lot of people have asked me in the past, like, oh, did you study cave paintings, or what do you study in anthropology? And my answer is always, you can really study anything. You can study any culture, any place and time. It's not in the past, it can be in the present. And it's an incredibly valuable tool when supporting businesses and looking at the culture of the people that they serve. I'm just noticing there's some chats. I'm not sure if I should be looking at the chats. Cave paintings, yes, cave paintings. I did not study cave paintings, just to be clear. I did study street art though. That was what my master was on, and the culture around street art and graffiti as a tool for community renewal. So that's an example of how you can study very urban contemporary topics in anthropology. And so I shared that as well as my background. So I applied anthropology to a number of different settings. So this is an example of the clients that I've worked with, everything from Ford, so cars, to TELUS, which is a telecommunications company in Canada, Whirlpool, retail, hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, and each one of them, human-centric approach could solve their problems. So whether it was a new product that they wanted to launch, whether it was a brand innovation challenge, whether it was coming up with an entirely new experience or service for their customers, taking a human-centric approach and understanding the lives of the people that they serve was an invaluable tool for these companies. And the way that we do this, just to give you some context, this is a photo of someone's home that I went to in Atlanta, Georgia, because a human-centric approach can't really happen if you're not open to being in the setting or the context in which the person is. So it's one thing to get someone's responses in a survey, it's another to actually be invited into someone's home and see their surroundings and meet their friends or see their living environment. So in my time, my work experience, I've had over, this is probably old now, 500 consumer interviews. I've done over 500 consumer interviews. I've been in over 100 homes all over the world, interviewing people, and done countless shadows, so following people in their environments, observing or shop alongs. And more recently, I'm adding Zoom tours onto my list. So being able to see not go into someone's home, but see it through Zoom or a virtual tour. And so through that, I've had over the years, so many deep insights into how people live their lives, what's important to them, how they think and feel, and how products or services play a role in their everyday. And I would never trade this for the number of surveys or quantitative data that I could get. I think this has been able to give me so much more a unique angle into what people are looking for. And the reason I think this is important is everyone these days is talking about consumer centricity or patient centricity and everything revolving around the customer. You know, personalization is a buzzword, and I think in some cases, customer centricity can be a bit of ad speak. It can be something that people espouse to or say they want, but when it comes to really understanding a customer, there's so many different methods to do that. And so here's an example of, you know, people's spending habits. Is this really what, you know, looking at a chart or an infographic of data, does that tell you, it says the spending habits of the modern consumer? What does that tell you about a consumer? Just because, you know, they spend 10 minutes browsing on a site, or 14 minutes browsing on a site, or 71% say this, 66% say this, does that really tell you who your consumer is? And so I wanted to take a moment just to say, how do we frame or reframe a consumer? So basically in research, we have qualitative research and we have quantitative research. Qualitative, just in a nutshell, is intended to explore, go deeper, seek to understand. Quantitative is meant to quantify, validate, and help make decisions. So in qualitative, we're really focused on understanding human behavior from that individual's perspective, from how they're speaking, from how they're acting. And that's done through observation, through interviews, and it's about coming up with themes at the end from the perspective of the participant. Quantitative is about measuring and discovering facts through numerical analysis and comparisons and statistics. And so in my experience, we need both. We need both quantitative and qualitative in order to paint a full picture of not only what people are doing, but why they are doing it and how they are doing it. And so the best type of research, in my experience, again, has been when we have a base in quantitative often, and then we can go deeper and explore in qualitative, or vice versa, start with some qualitative and then validate it with some quantitative. And what I really want to emphasize is that in qualitative, more human-centric approached research, it's culture and context that matter. So you can go to a, let's see, a photo down here, a music festival in Mexico or a music festival in Canada, and the culture can be completely different. How you would design that for a culture in one place is not how you would design something for a culture in a different place. And context, so understanding the environment, understanding the social norms of that place, understanding the relationships, the etiquette, the types of environment that's present in that area. So all these photos are examples of things that you could study. You could study a hospital interaction between a doctor and patient, and that might lead to a set of solutions around a service or the experience of going to the hospital. You could study, in this photo on the right, a restaurant and the journey of going through a restaurant just by sitting and observing how people are acting, what they're doing. And through that, you can gain understanding of what's important to them, what they're looking for in that experience. So culture and context really matter. And then this quote I thought was really nice. It's a quote that just summarizes the thoughts on the difference between sort of quantitative and qualitative. And it says, market research, so generally that's more quantitative, can indicate a set of statistically relevant predictions about what a larger population might do, but it will not describe what to make, how to make it, or what the interactions or experiences should feel like. So if you notice the language here, in quantitative or more traditional market research, it's about what people are doing, and it's trying to predict behavior, what they will do as a shopper or consumer in a very transactional way, versus really describing how someone feels or how they think, and that can help you decide what to make and how to make it. So one example of this that I thought I would share is another project that I was on years ago that was working for a large cosmetics company, and they had launched a campaign across Canada, done really, really well in this marketing campaign across Canada. And for some reason in one of our provinces, the French-speaking province of Quebec, the campaign completely flopped. And they didn't know why. They did some surveys and they just couldn't figure out what was going on and why the message wasn't resonating with that particular population. And so we were hired to go in and start to explore and unpack what was important to these consumers in this particular area or region, and try and figure out like what was going on, what were the differences, how did they need to change or adjust the campaign to make it land with people. And so we went into people's homes and we were talking to them about their cosmetics and makeup, and ultimately the concept of beauty in this place. And we went in their cupboards, we went into their bathrooms, we looked at their purses and emptied and looked at all the different makeup they had. And eventually we started to talk about the society there, so more of the culture, and how the church had really influenced concepts of beauty in Quebec, because the church had a past where they were seen as very corrupt, very materialistic, taking from the people and being really showy and ostentatious. And as a result, the population went against that and said, you know, we don't want to be overly materialistic. It represents the power and difference with the church and religious institution. And so they took on a much more subtle approach to beauty and aesthetics. And that then trickled down and translated into their cosmetic products. And so we shared that back as an insight with the team. And it's something that they never considered. They never thought about how these other forces, these other cultural phenomena could actually influence the way people think and behave in one province from the next. So subsequently, they launched a different campaign that was much more subdued, less glamorous, and it ended up doing much better, really, really well. So it just shows how culture context does influence, and the only way to get there is by spending the time going deep with people. Another important thing to note is knowing what people mean. So in a lot of market research, we do kind of surveys to understand values, or we sort of understand what people are thinking through quantitative means, but neglect to understand what is the meaning behind the words that they are saying. So for example, if we're trying to understand what are the cultural values of Gen Z in Mexico, and say one of the values is diversity, we could see that there's numerous different meanings or connotations behind diversity. So for one person, it might be diversity is about, in the workplace, it's about looking better than our competitors because our investors or our board members are looking for that. For someone else, diversity might mean, well, it's just the right thing to do. Or for someone else, it might mean it's about being unique and bringing different perspectives, and it will make our work and ideas better. And so it's important not just to get the data on what people are thinking, but what they mean by what they were thinking and how they're thinking about it. And words like, authenticity, integrity, purpose, all of those words are so important for brands right now, but it's super important to also understand what that means for your specific customer, because it might be very different than what it means for company A and company B. And then I also encourage to go beyond trend reports. So a lot of people can rely on trends to tell them how their customers are behaving or what's important. And in my experience, those are very directional, and you want to spend time really understanding which of those are important for your customer and how they come to life for your customer. So a trend around sustainability, for example, might look very different for someone living in Vancouver, which is where I live, to someone who's in, Japan. So understanding the humanness behind trends is also super, super important to remember. And really, when it comes to trends, what I want to just share is that it's not so much about the trend itself that's important. It's about what the underlying value is that's driving that trend. A lot of people can rely on those, yearly, myself included, yearly trend reports where it's like, this is big this year, this is big. And it's actually it's more important to look at a series of trends together and say, what is the commonality or what is the theme amongst these trends? And what does it say about what's important to this population of people? So just as an example, I put here, we're seeing some trends around, and this was kind of pre-COVID, but trends around pop-up spiritual or faith-based experiences, people gathering in more like pop culture type festivals that talked about spiritual practice. We were also seeing new definitions of wealth. So wealth, like happiness indexes and happiness measures for companies or for cities. We were seeing a trend towards more purposeful brands and civic movements. And if we look at all those things together, we could kind of compile them and say there's actually a commonality or a theme here about new ways for people to gather and be together, and that they're looking for something bigger than themselves and measuring life beyond the traditional metrics or traditional measures. So that's an example of how you look at kind of the human value underneath a trend and get at what's more important and why it's important to people, why it's important to your customer. I don't know if this will work, but I thought just as an example, I don't know if we can do this as a discussion, probably not, but I'll just give everyone a few minutes to just try this out. It's a fun little exercise where I've pulled 4 very distinct trends, And I thought I could just give you a few minutes to think through what is the underlying human value behind the trend. So one trend is space tourism. And so as we've seen over the last few years, private spaceflight companies like SpaceX are investing more and more into exploring this new frontier. They've announced plans to put space, people on space, on planets, and this has just been in the news quite frequently. So that's one trend. On its own, interesting, but if we look at it in conjunction with other trends and we look at the values underneath it, it's more interesting. So just taking a moment to think about what's the human motivation or the underlying value that could be driving this trend towards space tourism? And then the second one, if you just have something to jot that down, just take a note of it, because the second one is about biomimicry. And I don't know if that translates, the word translates into Spanish, but biomimicry is essentially taking inspiration from nature and building that into your products. And more with innovation and technology, we can, be inspired by the membrane of a frog and use that to create a new textile. Or in this example, the wing of a bird, and use that to inspire, a new airplane design. And so biomimicry is turning to nature to be inspired for new ideas and new products. And so if you take a moment, again, just think about, well, what's the human value or the human motivation behind biomimicry? Okay, and then, oops, sorry, I'm just trying to get rid of the Q&A that's now on my screen. Okay, here we go. Third one, so there's 4 in total. Third one is a trend around authentic experiences. So authentic experiences, this is slightly on pause at the moment in 2020, but prior to this, we were seeing such an uptick in the number of people who are wanting to travel and have more local, authentic experiences, not the big box hotels, stay more with local people, and really be immersed in the culture and the place of whatever market or city that they're in. And so we think, again, what are the underlying values or motivations of authentic experiences? And then the fourth one is the micro movement. So micro movement is about micro villages, homes getting smaller, people wanting to live more compact and minimal ways, and even shorter term jobs and having smaller, fewer belongings. And so again, thinking about the underlying values or motivations of people around the micro movement. And so when we put this all together, again, it's about going past the just the trend at face value, and we think about the humanness behind the trend, a pattern starts to emerge. And I don't think we have a functionality to have a discussion here. So I'll just share what I've heard in previous times when I've done this exercise. People say, well, in space tourism, it's about exploration, a new frontier. There's a human need to go out and see the world from a new perspective. Biomimicry could be about getting closer to nature, getting more one with nature. Authentic experience is, again, about exploring and being closer to local, closer to what a particular population has to offer. And micro movements is also about kind of downsizing, being more minimal living. And so all of these, if you look at them together, there's some theme or human kind of pattern around exploration, new perspectives, getting closer with nature and closer to authentic experiences and places and people. And so you could spend time crafting a nice pattern and a description around that, but ultimately I want to just leave you with that idea that it's a way to think about trends differently, a way to think about trends more from a human perspective in your work. Okay, I'm going to go through now 7 tips on how to approach human-centric marketing and human centricity for your brand. And I believe there's a Q&A at the end, so we'll be happy to answer any questions. So just note them down as we go. So first tip is expand the question that you're asking. So often in our work, we can ask very pointed, narrow, specific questions, such as how many positive product mentions did we have? How many customers are we acquiring through e-com? What is the age demographic that gravitates to our social channels? And how long on average do consumers spend browsing each channel? These are very specific, which in some cases are needed, but very specific, narrow questions. And what I find helpful is to broaden those questions to really get at underlying motivations and needs. So for example, what do the underlying feelings and emotions tell us about the way our product is performing? How does our website fit into the lives of our customers? Where and how are they using it, and what else might be happening around them? So how do we know how people are shopping, or what are the cases where they are shopping and using our site? We might also ask for this third question, how are these age cohorts using social? Like, in what context are they using it? What role does it have in their identity, or how do they interact with the world? How does social play a role in their overall interactions with the world and their peers? And then lastly, what is meaningful in an exploratory experience online for people? What's the underlying need of discovery, maybe, that's not being fulfilled? So just spending time thinking about how you can broaden out questions and think about them in a more, again, human-centric and a broader way. That's tip number 1. Number 2, using the right methods of data collection. So I talked about the difference earlier about quantitative and qualitative methods, and not complete here on the left-hand side. Quantitative methods, often surveys, questionnaires, polls. Qualitative methods are things like in-home interviews, group context labs. I think I saw a question about kind of focus groups potentially. I typically don't do focus groups in the traditional sense of a focus group, which is having a group of people in a room and a mirror and people behind the mirror. And the reason not is because it really removes people from their everyday environment. And not only that, it creates a sort of sense of like being observed, like you're in a zoo and someone's observing you, versus a more casual, welcoming, open conversation. So in group discussions, I try and hold them or host them in settings that feel relevant to the discussion. So in my work at Lululemon, for example, since it's an activewear brand, a wellness company, we might host a discussion group in a studio, a workout studio. And so there's some level of context that's present in that conversation. You can also use shop along, so following people and going with them shopping in a store. And when you do that, you get to see how they interact with products, how they think through their process of shopping for something, what they gravitate to, what they don't gravitate to. And you learn a lot by being there and being a part of that experience. You can also try online diaries and exercises. So having people journal about their experience over the course of a few days, over the course of a week. And that's nice if you are trying to understand habits. So, what they might be eating over the course of a day, if you're trying to come up with a new snack product, for example. Or in the case of Parkinson's, it was about journaling symptoms over the course of 2 weeks. And that gives insight into something broader than just the moment in time that you're speaking to them. In-field immersion, so you might go to, their office place or wherever, outside of the home, wherever they might be spending their time. And then lastly, social scanning or netnography. So looking online at Instagram, Facebook groups, blogs, group forums, anywhere where you're seeing people have a dialogue and interact with one another. That can also be a great spot for insight into how people are thinking or feeling about a particular topic. Third tip is to listen. Listen carefully to language. One example of this is a project that I was doing where we were working for a bread company, and they were trying to launch a campaign for this new sandwich bread that they had. And so we went into people's homes, watched them make sandwiches, looked at the ingredients that they were using, watched them put things together, and ultimately listened to the ways that they talked about what they were doing. What was interesting was at the end, I was not expecting this, but at the end, we found that the way that the women in the study and the men in the study talked about sandwiches was very different. And it might have just been the sample that we were talking to, but it gave the creative team a lot of inspiration, because the way the women talked about making sandwiches was, I create a sandwich with a lot of care. I put it together. It was sort of caring, but also neutral language. And then the way that men were talking about sandwiches was as if it was a project. They were building a sandwich. They were making the biggest, like, they were so excited. It was like a masterpiece, putting in the meat, putting in the right mayo, putting in the all the different ingredients. And so at the end, the creative team for this campaign came up with a fun idea about the idea of like building a hardcore masterpiece sandwich. And so I share that because the language that people use, the words and vocabulary they use, can be really insightful and really indicative of how people are feeling or thinking about a particular topic that you can then either dig deeper into or leverage for brainstorming exercise. Number 4, drop assumptions. I think this is probably one of the most important things that I've learned in terms of doing research and trying to come at it from a very human-centric approach. Drop the assumptions that you think you have about a particular person or group of people. You know, just because they, you know, for me, living with Parkinson's, for example, I drop assumptions about what you think they can or can't do. Just because I might be studying, you know, runners, and I might think I know everything about running because I run as well. You want to go into any conversation or research not assuming anything, not thinking that you know things about this person or about groups of people, because when you do that, you actually pick up so much more. And I included this quote here because I thought this was really interesting, that we receive 11 million bits of information every moment, but can only consciously process 40. This means that 99% of the information we process is unconscious, meaning we have all sorts of assumptions that we don't even know that we have, because 99% of the information we process is unconscious. And so it's really important, if you are going to take a more human-centric approach and really try and dig deeper with your customers or consumers, that you start the process by first thinking about what do you already have as an assumption about them, because they live in a certain place, because they have a certain income, because they have a certain profession, because they do a certain hobby. Think about those and at least be aware of them, or try and drop them from the beginning and be open to what you can learn. Oh, this was an example. I forgot to put this in here, but this is just a fun example of, you know, how we might have assumptions about things quickly. So the quick exercise here is, you know, jot down your initial feeling to this image, just positive, negative, neutral. And I can't see anyone, so this won't work as well as when I'm in a room. In a room, people put a red marker up if they have a negative feeling, a green marker up if it's a positive, or yellow if it's neutral. Often there's a whole mix. So you might, for me, I see this, I'm like, oh, I don't know, it looks really techy, not really positive image, so I'll put a red marker up. Then I show a headline that goes along with the image. Why I'm turning my son into a cyborg. Quick reaction, positive, negative, neutral. Again, this is often very mixed for people. For me, it was kind of negative. I'm like, oh, I don't like the sound of that, so it's another red pen. Then I share the article that goes with the headline, that goes with the image. And I won't read this, but basically this article says that this woman is building, is trying to hack new solutions for her son because he cannot understand, he's autistic and cannot understand regular human emotion. And so she's trying to augment his sight, hearing, memory, emotions, emotional face reading, etc., so that he can be more, quote, neurotypical, like other people's sons. And so, again, reaction to this could be positive, negative, neutral. When I first read this, I changed from a red and a red to a green. And so this is just a really quick but effective example of how we can have snap judgments and assumptions about things or people we see or read without having the full context and without understanding the full story. And so again, when you're going out and talking to customers or consumers, it's about not making a snap judgment based on one thing that they've said. It's about really understanding the full story around that thing. And I've been with numerous clients who said, oh, that one interview was great. That one thing that person said, that gave me an aha moment. And it could have, but I'd also be wary of the number of times you can just latch onto one thing that one person said versus trying to understand a bigger picture. Tip number 5 is change the way that you represent people. Instead of showing them as charts or graphs or numbers or statistics, it's about sharing a story. Pictures, quotes, videos, all of those things help bring people to life. And more importantly, it's able to create greater impact within your organization. So whenever you're able to, in my case, like share a film about research or interviews, pictures, or any ways to bring what I've learned to life, it creates that much more buy-in and that much more enrollment from an executive team. So they're not just seeing, oh, it's 37% or 33%. They're saying, oh, okay, this person feels this way, and I heard it from their mouth. So change the way that you represent people, or where you can. Try and add in a bit more color and richness to how you talk about people. Make it about a partnership and not a transaction. So your customer isn't just giving you data. Think about it as a relationship. So if you're going to have an interview with them, it's not about taking information from them to go build a product. It's about creating a relationship where they can trust you and they think that they know that they are contributing just as equally as you are to the future of the business, the future of a product. So working to create that kind of sense of reciprocity and understanding between you and your customers just helps your research and your information, your insights go a lot farther. And number 7, know your role. Does everyone know who these two people are? I can't see hands, but I'm going to assume some of you do, maybe some of you don't. I use this photo just to share. As a brand, do you think you are, so this is from The Hobbit, Frodo on the left, who's the Hobbit, and Gandalf, the wizard, on the right. As a brand, are you meant to be Frodo or Gandalf? And I'm guessing there's maybe a mix of answers, or maybe everyone said one thing, but I'll say that your role is to be Gandalf. You are not the hero of the story. You are meant to be a guide and facilitator for your, or navigator for your consumers to find solutions. And I think this is what we've seen change a lot in the world of marketing over the last few years or decades, is that it's not about putting your brand on a pedestal. It's about putting your consumer in the spotlight and being the one to guide them forward and to give them solutions based on what their needs are and understanding their needs at that time, which is what Gandalf does for Frodo. So this is an example of how you would do that. You might create a set of scenarios where you can insert yourself not as the hero, but as the guide who is facilitating new choices for your consumer. So you might create a set of prompts, brainstorming prompts, like, what if the idea of ownership in the future was no longer true? Not what would you do? What would your consumer do? And then, therefore, what would you do to solve that? What if environmental waste was illegal? What would your consumer do? And therefore, what would you do to solve it or to help them or support them? So it's about creating these questions or prompts if you're in an ideation session or if you're thinking about future strategy, and starting from your consumer first. What will be their reaction? And then what will be our role and how will we step in and guide them in the right path? And then lastly, here we have Greta, speak with purpose. If you do human-centric research or take an approach that's very human-centric, you want to speak with purpose. And now more than ever, I think that people's BS meters are pretty high. Everyone's trying to be a purposeful brand. And so to be purposeful, you need to really understand the issues and what matters to your consumers, your clients, your customers, and share that, speak it in their language so that they understand, and do it with the conviction that you feel as a brand that you are solving their problems, that you've come up with true solutions for them. So speak with purpose. And so those are the 8, I guess there was 8 tips, not 7, 8 tips that I wanted to share. And I hope that through this, I've been able to at least give some insight into my perspective on becoming more human-centric. Whether you're doing research or not, it's about instilling a mindset and moving away from one of going past data, relying just on numbers and statistics, and moving more to understanding how humans think and feel and looking at the person, not just the shopper. So thank you very much. I'm very excited to answer any questions, and I will hand it over to, I guess, Amanda or Raquel or Edgar to go from here. Thank you, everyone.